Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. This is a community where curious seekers gather to explore spiritual, ethical, and social issues in an accepting and nurturing environment. Unitarian Universalism supports the freedom of conscience of each individual, as together we seek to be a force for good in the world. My name is Karen Rose Gredler, and on behalf of the congregation, I want to extend a special welcome to visitors and a wholehearted welcome to all who are with us on a regular basis. We are a welcoming congregation, so whomever you are and wherever you are on your life's journey, we celebrate your presence among us. We trust that today's service will stimulate your mind, touch your heart, and stir your spirit. And now I invite you into a few moments of silence for contemplation, meditation, prayer, as we settle in and come fully into this place together. Number 360, here we have gathered.
seated. I believe that imagination is stronger than knowledge, that myth is more important than history. I believe that dreams are more powerful than facts, that hope always triumphs over experience, that laughter is the only cure for grief, and I believe that love is stronger than death. And since I didn't bring my order of service with me, I have no idea what happens next. Ah, yes. We could stand and exchange friendly greetings one with another. Oh, the chalice lighting. Somebody ring the gong and we're going to start. All right. If you will join me in the chalice lighting, the words of the chalice lighting are printed in your order of service. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys, sorrows, gifts, and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. And now. Scrambler.
Are there any children of any age who'd like to hear a story? I am very excited about this one. I think it's spectacular. Hello. Come on. What? Yes, you were. He was first by 30 seconds. Not that he's counting or comparing or anything, but you know. Always. Okay. Want to come up a little closer? Oh, good. Some more people. Anybody else? Any older children who would like to hear this fantastic story? Oh, 9 years old. Well, you're almost aged out, but we're happy to have you anyway. There is the book. It is called The Honest to Goodness Truth. And I love this book because I think it fits so well with Jim's message today, because it talks about the nuance. You guys don't know what that means. That's okay. Nuance of truth. And it's by the wonderful children's writer, Patricia McKissick. Some of you who are librarians or teachers will know her name. The Honest to Goodness Truth. Now, this is set in a rural area in probably a time gone by. Libby hurried out the door and down the porch steps. "Did you feed and water old Boss?" Mama called from her sewing room window. Old Boss was the horse. Libby stopped at the gate. "Yes, Mama," she answered. She was surprised at how easy that lie came out of her mouth, like it was greased with warm butter. Mama stopped sewing Virginia Washington's wedding dress and came outside. Libby dropped her head and wouldn't look in her mother's eyes. "Are you sure?" Mama asked in a real stern, like, Speak the truth and shame the devil. Libby opened her mouth, but Mama placed a finger in the air as a signal for her to stop. Libby Louise Sullivan, I'll ask you one more, and again, did you feed and water old boss? Libby's stomach felt like she'd swallowed a handful of chicken feathers. Her eyes commenced to fill with water and her bottom lip quivered. Did yours ever do that? When you're kind of nervous or something? Then, taking a deep breath and a gulp that was hard, she opened up to her lie. I was gonna do it as soon as I got back from jumping rope with Ruthie May. Well, Libby felt a lot better, even though Mama punished her double, for not tending to old boss. Libby couldn't play with Ruthie May. And for lying, she had to stay on the porch the whole rest of the day. It was the first time Libby had lied to Mama, and as far as she was concerned, it was going to be the last. From now on, I'll tell only the truth, she said. Can you guys see those pictures up front well enough? Okay. Oh, look at that pretty picture of her with her school friends. All the children from Bryersville were gathered outside the small church, waiting on Sunday school to begin. Everybody was admiring Ruthie May's new dress and matching hat when Libby came skipping up. Morning, everybody. Morning, Ruthie May. She spoke all nice. I like your outfit. It's real pretty, but you've got a hole in your sock. All eyes went from the hat to the dress to the hole. Meanwhile, Libby skipped up the steps and inside the church without ever noticing the hurt feeling on her best friend's face. Services ended, and same as always, Libby asked Ruthie May to walk home. No, and no again, Ruthie May glared at her. Libby was purely surprised. What'd I do? You told the world I had a hole in my sock. It was the truth, Libby pronounced, feeling satisfied. It was plain mean, replied Ruthie May, and she hurried away. Well, Libby looked at the idea from the outside in and then from the inside out as she walked home alone. But by the time she trudged up her steps, she was still confused. The next morning, Libby joined a group of friends on the way to school. Did you do your geography homework? Willie asked Libby. It was easy, she answered. Not for me. Willie shook his head. I didn't understand it, so I didn't do it. First thing in class, Libby started waving her hand. Me, Miss Jackson, me, Miss Jackson. When the teacher called on her, Libby announced, Willie don't got his geography assignment. Doesn't have his homework, corrected Ms. Jackson. No, ma'am, he don't. Libby was pleased with herself. Willie gave her an ugly look. Look, he's sticking his tongue out at her. Why'd you tell on me? He whispered as he headed to Ms. Jackson's desk to explain. With certainty, she whispered back, all I did was tell it like it is, so there. And she folded her hands neatly in her lap. Before lunchtime, Libby had told a lot of truths. She reminded everyone how Daisy had forgotten her Christmas speech and cried in front of all the parents. She told how Charlotta had gotten a spanking for stealing peaches off Miss Stacy's tree, and the whole class knew that Thomas didn't have lunch money and had to borrow some from Ms. Jackson. Well, how do you think things were going by then? I think she was probably on everybody's dirt list. By the time school was out, hardly anyone would talk to her. Why are y'all so mad at me? Libby asked as her classmates started home without her. On Libby's way home, she wondered why her stomach felt as fluttery as it did when she told the lie. I promised Mama I would tell the truth no matter how much it hurt, she reassured herself glumly. And that's all I done. Before Libby knew it, she was in front of Ms. Tussleberry's vine-covered cottage. The woman was in her rocking chair, gliding back and forth and fanning herself with a hand-folded fan. How do, Libby Louise, she called in her sing-song voice. What's that sad look you're wearing on such a pretty day? Libby jumped right in with what was bothering her. "Can the truth be wrong?" she asked. "Oh, no," Miss Tussleberry said, fanning faster. "The truth is never wrong. Always, always tell the truth." "That's what I thought," Libby said, with a smile of relief lighting up her face. Miss Tussleberry leaned over the railing to pluck a bloom from one of her vines that grew all over her yard and up her house. "Don't you think my garden is lovely?" Libby thought on it. Well, ordinarily she would have just said yes for fear of sounding sassy, but that wasn't the truth. So polite as you please, she answered, "Miss Tussleberry, truly and honestly, your yard looks like a jungle." "Well, I declare," Miss Tussleberry gasped. "Don't be mad," Libby pleaded. But it was too late. Miss Tussleberry rushed inside her house and slammed the door. Even though Mama was busy putting the finishing touches on Virginia Washington's wedding dress, she still took time to listen to Libby's problem. "I feel something awful. My friends don't like me no more." "Anymore," repeated her mother. "No, they don't, and just 'cause I told the truth." The girl sighed deeply. Handing her mother a needle to thread, Mama asked gently, "Are they mad at you for telling the truth?" "I think so," said Libby. "Willie was mad as a hornet when I told Miss Jackson he didn't have his homework, and Miss Tussleberry got plenty upset when I told her garden looked like a jungle." Mama smiled. "Oh, I see." Then putting down her work, she took Libby's hand, saying, "Sometimes the truth is told at the wrong time or in the wrong way or for the wrong reasons, and that can be hurtful, but the honest-to-goodness truth is never wrong." Then Mama went back to stitching and pulling and stitching and pulling. Well, Libby walked to the barn to feed and water old Boss, all the time trying to get an understanding of her mother's words. Just then, Virginia Washington sashayed out of the fields, past the barn, come for the final fitting of her wedding dress. As she watched Libby brush old Boss, Virginia burst into laughter. "Ha! That horse is older than black pepper," she said, shaking her head. "And I doubt you could get $1 for that old flea-ridden swayback." And she flounced off toward the house. "Don't say those things about old Boss," Libby called after her, throwing her arms around the horse's neck. She knew he wasn't a fine carriage horse he'd once been, but why did Virginia have to rub it in? Now Libby thought back on her own truth-telling, and Mama's words suddenly became crystal clear. The next day, Libby caught up with her friends on the way to school. She told Ruthie Mae, "You did have a hole in your sock, but I could have whispered it to you instead of hollering it out for everyone to hear. I'm sorry." Ruthie Mae smiled. "You finally got it," she said. Libby apologized to Willie, too. "I should have let you tell Ms. Jackson about your own homework." "That's all right. But hey," he added, "do you think you could help me with my geography homework?" "No problem," said Libby. But there was one more person she had to see. On the way home, she headed straight for Ms. Tussleberry's house. Libby found her neighbor out front, down on all fours. See how she's crawling around down there? Take care of her weeds. When Ms. Tussleberry saw her, she wiped her brow with the back of her hand and flashed a full smile. "I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings yesterday," Libby said. "Libby Louise, you were right," Ms. Tussleberry replied. "This place had gone completely and uncontrollably wild." "But you were so mad at me." Miss Tussleberry waved a disarming hand. "The truth is often hard to chew, but if it's sweetened with love, then it's a little easier to swallow." Libby really didn't understand, but she picked up a hoe and began helping. "Things are really looking pretty good around here," she said. And that was the honest-to-goodness truth. So there's a difference in the truth and how we tell it and how we say it and whether we're sweet when we do that. Okay, we are going to sing a song while you go off to summer fun. We are going to sing, what are we singing? 16, 'Tis a Gift to Be Simple. We almost all know this one by heart.
Please be seated. The first reading, Humpty Dumpty, appears in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, that was written in 1872, where he discusses semantics and pragmatics with Alice in the following dialogue. "I don't know what you mean by glory," Alice said. Humpty Dumpty smiled contemptuously. "Of course you don't, till I tell you. I meant there's a nice knockdown argument for you." "But glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument," Alice objected. "When I use the word," Humpty Dumpty said in a rather scornful tone, "it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less." "The question is," said Alice, "whether you can make words mean so many different things." "The question is," said Humpty Dumpty, which is to be master, that's all." Alice was too much puzzled to say anything, so after a minute, Humpty Dumpty began again. "They've a temper, some of them, particularly verbs. They're the proudest. Adjectives you can do anything with, but not verbs. However, I can manage the whole lot. Impenetrability. That's what I say."
Our second reading, do I have this on? Yep. Our second reading is from Dr. Rachel Noble, professor of environmental science. Gone are the days when we simply read our local paper or watch one nightly news program after dinner. We're flooded by information from the internet, social media, and cable TV. Whom can we trust? How do we know if the news we're digesting and redistributing is even true? It turns out that what we believe and don't believe is based on a combination of emotion, logic, and memory, and that complex cocktail is all housed in our brains. This can be dangerous, leading us down a path of believing information that isn't even true. Research has found that people usually gravitate toward news that supports their own beliefs and ignores information that challenges their views. This is known as confirmation bias, according to Talia Shara, a neuroscience scientist and author of The Influential Mind. It is extremely difficult to open someone to a new idea. Data is not enough. It must be communicated in a way that taps into people's emotions, needs, and desires, Shara says. This helps explain how folks can believe a seemingly questionable story. If it generates an emotional response, stoking fear or reinforcing beliefs, we bite. Advertising experts such as Troy King have known this for years. People buy into something because it is an emotional connection, King says. Logic has little to do with it. Even so, most Americans feel fake news is hazardous. 64% of US adults say fabricated news stories cause confusion about issues and events, according to a recent survey by the Pew Research Center.
Thank you, Philip. Excellent to find some joyous, upbeat Bach there. Well, as I have said before in this same venue, see if you were paying attention, there are two kinds of people in the world: those who divide people into two groups and those who don't. Keep it simple. But simple isn't easy. I remember vividly Donald Trump's great moment of clarity. Healthcare is complicated. Who knew? There are three umpires sitting in a locker room comparing strategies. First ump says, some of them's strikes and some of them's balls, and I calls them as I sees them. Second ump says, some of them's strikes and some of them's balls, and I calls them as they are. Third ump says, some of them strikes and some of them's balls, but they ain't nothing till I calls them. First ump is a realist, accepting his role and his limitations. The second ump is a fundamentalist. He believes that his calls exactly reflect reality, that his words are true. The third ump is a semanticist, maybe even a UU, who understands that words are human, ambiguity lurks, meanings are shaky, intentions are murky. He knows that a pitch is a ball that passes through an imaginary window. But without that window, there would be no game. My topic is fundamentalism. Not so much religious fundamentalism, but plain old garden variety fundamentalism. Things are what they are, and our words represent them. It's simple, as Humpty Dumpty explained to Alice. Words are powerful. Kids learn this very early, the meaning of no and mine, and a little later, why. Remember those classic dialogues? Why? Because. Because why? Because I said so. The basic principle of fundamentalism. It contains the unspoken idea, because it's our house and we're bigger than you are. Yep, it's about power. Fundamentalism is a part of my own religious journey, so deeply ingrained in my 16 years of Catholic education, it was invisible to me. When I began my theological studies, I'm guessing that most of my classmates were unconscious fundamentalists, as we sat down to our first class in theology, sacred scripture. In the Christian tradition, we were taught that the Bible was inspired by God. Every word in it is true. The truth was revealed to the sacred writers, passed on by the leaders of the Judeo-Christian community, clergy, writers, parents, down through the generations. Extracting that truth from the Bible is a bit tougher. What many Bible fundamentalists do is piece together bits and pieces that they can understand and feel strongly about, particularly in matters of race and sexual morality. By the end of the first week, my class, the largest class that seminary ever had divided into two groups. The first group said, forget about all this scholarly analysis. We can't learn all that stuff. We're just going to hold on to the simple principle. It's the Word of God, and it's all true. Pure fundamentalist position. The second group said, If the Bible is the revealed Word of God, it must be important to learn what those words mean. To give up simplistic, magical notions of inspiration and probe the sources to find their meaning. So, what would be a non-fundamentalist way of understanding the Bible? The various books of the Old and New Testaments that grew out of the history of the Jewish people and represents an interpretation of their experiences based on the foundational principle of their faith, that Yahweh had chosen them as his people and demanded fidelity to his covenant. The priestly compiler of these experiences did not select them to be pious or edifying. Consider the murderous Cain, the father of the race. Consider Jacob, the hustler, who conned his dim older brother out of his birthright. Consider the adulterous David, and so on. One of the deep assumptions underlying the accounts of the Old and New Testaments is the primacy of patriarchy. The so-called religions of the book, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, are desert religions. They have nomadic roots. The tribes survived on the principle of patriarchy. One man, the Sharif, made a decision, and that was it. Fast, indisputable, efficient. I think there are actually deep biological roots for patriarchy, which explain the fierceness with which its defenders respond to threats. Primatologists distinguish between tournament species, in which the male is as much as 50% larger than the female. He is concerned with passing on his own genes to the next generation and has only a transient physical relationship with the female who bears his offsprings. Think the great apes, gorillas, baboons, chimps. Their opposite numbers are called pair bonding species, like bonobos, where the female and male are this equal size, bear equal responsibility for the offspring, and form stable, monogamous relationships. Of course, Homo sapiens, that's us, are not pair bonding species exactly. Males are typically about 10% larger than the females, are not biologically disposed to monogamy, are much disposed to establish rankings by exercising power symbolically or physically. Think muscle cars and corner offices. Sapiens create social systems and practices that valorize patriarchy as a structuring principle. And because the biological edge of sapient males is so small, the need to defend that edge in the culture wars is fierce. The passionate response to the Me Too movement is evidence of the widespread experience of women, and not just women, to predatory sexual behaviors, and perhaps worse, to the smug sense of entitlement, which has dismissed these behaviors in the past. Boys will be boys. What good is power if you can't exercise it? The assertion of patriarchy is often most obvious in the realm of religious practice. Consider the awkward tangle being experienced by contemporary evangelicals in the current political and cultural scene. As the prominent evangelical pastor Tim Keller recently wrote, evangelical used to denote people who claimed the high moral ground. Now, in popular usage, the word is nearly synonymous with hypocrite. So it is little wonder that last year the Princeton Evangelical Fellowship, an 87-year-old ministry, dropped the E word from its name, becoming the Princeton Christian Fellowship. Too many students had identified the term with conservative political ideology. Indeed, a number of serious evangelicals are distancing themselves from the word for similar reasons. Professors Ron Hessinger and Kristen Tobey also suggest that evangelicals are concerned with the preservation of patriarchy. Many commentators have puzzled about the seeming hypocrisy of those who would see adultery and womanizing as grave sins, and yet ignore these behaviors in their ministers and political leaders, mentioning no names. And yet, for those who know the history of evangelicalism in America, this should be no surprise at all. Hessinger and Tobey insist there are good reasons why we need to expect this result. The history and sexual politics of evangelicalism in America fit well with Trumpian attitudes. As it turns out, the idea of evangelical Christianity is rooted in a conception of biblically inspired male dominance and superiority, used as a selling point for the religion spread in the South, and cleverly packaged as family values. The authoritarian dynamic was central to Southern antebellum families, Hessinger and Tobey point out. To win Southern hearts, evangelicals buttressed patriarchy, empowering fathers and father figures, looking the other way when they took prerogatives that crossed moral lines. Catering to Southern values, evangelicalism became one of the predominant forms of religious expression in America. One of the pillars of evangelical Christianity is the perception that evangelicals are outcasts, standing bravely against the evil forces of the world. This is characteristic of a cult because it spawns a group persecution complex that solidifies the community. As the authors point out, religious outsiders have much to gain from boundary maintenance, often courting outcast status or even persecution to rally the faithful, us and them. We know the problems of our society. They are often interrelated. Economic inequality, race, patriarchy, over-aggressive policing, uncontrolled and technically vulnerable electronic media, fake news, vast expenditures by one-issue lobbyists, ecological disasters happening before our cameras and instruments. Well, make your own list. Nothing on the list is new, but technological changes have intensified the issues. I think the majorities of Americans still believe, with various levels of conviction, that the democratic process can address the problems of our nation. We UUs are committed to this as one of our founding principles. Fintan O'Toole, writing in the Irish Times, well, where would somebody named Fintan O'Toole write if not in the Irish Times? Fintan O'Toole suggests a darker scenario. The president may be deliberately indifferent to the nuances of politics, but he is skilled and experienced in the process of test marketing, dating back to his early career in marketing himself, planting stories in the gossip pages of the New York tabloids, then confirming or denying them after studying the reaction. And he recreated himself in reality TV, where the storylines can be adjusted in response to the ratings. Put something out there, pull it back, adjust based on the response, then go again. Consider the border immigration story. zero tolerance policy. Blame it on Obama. Blame it on the law. Claim powerlessness. Then act to change the policy, but resist implementation. While the nation reacts in horror, Fox News, which the president watches for validation, reacts with enthusiasm, mocking the images, calling the children actors, the immigrants an infestation. The ratings affirmed this treatment. O'Toole suggests that the administration is test marketing fascist news. While the public response to the border policies have been intensely negative, the base is solidly behind the president. As O'Toole points out, Hitler never had the political support of a majority of his people, but was successful in the gradual demonization of the Jews, with the results that we all remember. It's a very ominous observation. So, how can we as UUs address these problems? There's a story of the newly elected senator who tells the staff speechwriter that he's cutting back on staff and that he doesn't need a speechwriter, but then tells the writer as a last assignment to sketch out his inaugural address. The embittered scribe sits down to his Smith Corona, lists the problems of the state and nation, then writes at the top of the second page, "Okay, Senator, you're on your own." I have the feeling that I've done that to myself. My intention in these reflections is not to condemn fundamentalism, because I think it is natural. It has a childlike directness and clarity. We can see that the earth is flat. We can see that the sun passes across the sky. We can add up the ages in the Bible and come to a precise knowledge of the age of the earth. Do the math. But at some point in the maturing process, we have to recognize that the universe is more complex than we imagine, perhaps than we can imagine. That human behavior, even our own, is beyond simple explanation. Nor is my intention to condemn patriarchy outright, but to recognize its excesses. Even Pope Francis, a man obviously striving to practice an authentic personal Christianity, has, until recently, remained blind to the inferior status of women in the church, has believed and trusted in his fellow bishops in the face of overwhelming evidence of sexual abuse and their denial of it. Nor do I wish to devalue the personal religious experience of evangelicals, the liberating sense of being born again, forgiven, loved, but rather to be alert to the dangers of righteousness, its long, bloody contributions to the history of religions. We love stories because they have an end, and at least the implication of meaning. We tell stories to express our understanding of how our world works. When our stories attempt to explain how our world works, we call them myths. When we incorporate them into formalized tellings, rituals, and sacramentalize them, incorporating the physical world into the telling, they evolve into religions. Since none of us, Stephen Hawking included, have a mind that encompasses everything, our stories have to be inadequate, limited, incomplete. We don't call the story of our religion truth. We call it our understanding. And we invite others to share that understanding. And we try to grow in our understanding and in our practice, reaching in to practice mindfulness, reaching out to deepen our community, caring, then acting. May it be so. Let's begin that by starting our offering of the gifts for our congregation.
In addition to your generous monetary gifts, we also appreciate the many gifts of those who help to make our services run smoothly. This morning, your greeter was Claire Boggs. Your ushers are Gail Bliss, Tom Dolmage, and Brian Carness. Your sound operator is Maureen Friend. Hospitality, coffee preparation, lemon water is being prepared by Blaze Thompson. Our lay minister is Pamela McMullen. Tour guide is John Powell. I believe he's going to be here, and if you would like to have a tour, please join John over at what is your left side of the service, or of the auditorium right after the service. Let's see. Oh, Karen Jagger brought us the lovely flowers that are up here by the chalice, and Hannah Pinkerton is in charge of care of the pulpit flowers. or pulpit palms for this week. We join together each week a community who gathers with joys and sorrows written on our hearts. In this place, we love and are loved. We forgive and we are forgiven. We give and we receive in return. We come together to find strength and common purpose, turning our minds and hearts toward one another, seeking to bring our circle of concern to all who need our love and support. We do have an entry in our book of Concern and Joy, which sits outside the front door to the auditorium. Charlotte Wolf would like to light a candle, and I will do that as soon as I quit talking, for a dear friend, Carol Gempler, admitted to the hospital after a heart attack and pneumonia diagnosis. So we will all think of her, Char. Thank you for mentioning it. In fact, let me light the candle right now before I forget. Here we go. Let us all with Char hold Carol in our hearts. Let's please take a moment to remember all the joys and all the sorrows too tender to share that live in the fullness of our hearts. Let's just take a moment. May we remember that we are part of a web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. May we be grateful for the miracle of life that we share and the hope that gives us the power to care, to remember, and to love. And now, please rise as you are able for our closing hymn number 6, which is Just as Long as I Have Breath.
is to mend our broken world. If religion cannot do that, it is worthless. And what our world needs now is not belief, not certainty, but compassionate action and respect, practically expressed, for the sacred value of all human beings, even our enemies. Our service is now concluded. Please remain for the postlude.